You know, for centuries, long before airplanes sliced through the clouds, before steamships conquered the oceans, and way before we drew all these borders on our maps, there was a network that connected the entire known world. But it wasn't built on wires or satellites. It was built on something much more basic, something profoundly human.
So when you look at an image like this, you're not just seeing a desert. You're looking at the actual canvas for one of the greatest stories ever told. A story of a world powered not by engines, but by footsteps, by the sheer endurance of animals, and, let's be honest, by a kind of courage that's almost impossible for us to imagine today.
Okay, so the first thing we've got to get straight is that the name Silk Road is, well, it's a bit misleading. There was never one single grand highway stretching all the way from China to Europe. The truth is so much more complicated and honestly, way more fascinating.
What you're looking at here is a living, breathing system. This wasn't one road. It was this incredible web of constantly shifting paths, both overland and by sea. It connected dozens of cultures across 3 different continents. I mean, this was it. This was the world's first global network, linking civilizations that in many cases would never, ever meet face to face.
So how on earth did it actually work? Well, it all came down to a system that we now call relay trade. Think of it like a giant relay race. A merchant from China might travel just a few hundred kilometers to a big trading hub. There, he'd sell his goods to, say, a Sogdian merchant, who would then take them on the next leg of the journey. The risks were just so huge that almost nobody ever traveled the whole thing. A single piece of silk could change hands a dozen times before it finally got to its destination in Rome. And this, right here, is the absolute heart of it. This entire world-spanning system, it wasn't built on ironclad contracts or international law. It was built on a simple chain of handshakes. It was built on reputation, on human trust. And you know what? That's the very same principle that holds up our modern world today, whether it's in the code of a crypto transaction or the agreements that guide a massive cargo ship across the ocean. But that trust, man, it was tested every single day because the journey itself was just unforgiving. This was the ultimate high-risk, high-reward venture, where just showing up alive was never, ever a guarantee. The dangers were just relentless. I mean, imagine you're out there. You've got organized bandit attacks and the constant threat of nomadic tribes. You've got local rulers who could change the taxes or just decide they don't like you, all on a whim. Then you have the planet itself fighting you. Brutal deserts, freezing mountains, and the terrifying threat of an oasis drying up. And even if you survive all that, you still have to figure out how to communicate and make a deal with someone who doesn't speak your language or share your culture.
And to really put that into perspective, think about this number, 40 kilometers. That's about 25 miles. That was a good day's travel for a camel caravan, a full day, sunrise to sunset. So what that really means is your survival depended completely on what you found at the end of those 40 kilometers. And the solution they came up with was just brilliant, the caravanserai. These are basically fortified roadside inns, built by smart rulers about a day's journey apart. They had these massive walls to keep robbers out, stables for the exhausted animals to rest, and rooms for merchants to sleep safely. But they were so much more than just forts. They were these little hubs of civilization in the absolute middle of nowhere, a place to hear the news, make a trade, and just find a moment of peace. These places, they made the impossible journey possible.
Now, we call it the Silk Road for a reason, right? But here's the big secret. As precious as silk was, it was never the most important thing that moved along these routes. The cargo that truly changed the world was completely invisible.
Just look at this breakdown. On the left, yeah, you've got the famous luxury items, the silk, the spices, the beautiful porcelain, stuff that made people incredibly rich. But look at the right. These are the things that literally remade civilizations. Chinese inventions like paper and gunpowder traveled west and completely changed writing and warfare in Europe. Entire religions like Buddhism and Islam spread across continents, and so did game-changing knowledge in science, art, and technology.
And that's really the key thing to understand here. Goods, they were exchanged in the marketplaces, but ideas traveled inside the minds of the people walking these paths, the merchants, the pilgrims, the scholars. They weren't just carrying cargo, they were carrying brand new ways of seeing the world. But, you know, no system, no matter how powerful, lasts forever. The end of the Silk Road wasn't some sudden event. It was more like a slow fade, driven by huge, massive shifts happening all across the globe.
It actually happened over centuries. Even at its peak, you started to see cracks forming from things like rising religious intolerance and even climate change. Then, a huge moment. 1453, the fall of Constantinople. That really threw a wrench in the gears, making the old land routes way more dangerous and expensive. But the final nail in the coffin? That came in the 1490s, when European ships finally figured out how to sail directly to Asia. Suddenly, boats were just faster, cheaper, and more reliable than camels. The game had changed.
Which brings us to the big question, right? If the caravans stopped and the ancient roads fell silent, does that mean the Silk Road is just over, a story for the history books? Or did it simply evolve?
Because while the technology changed, that fundamental human drive behind it all, that need to connect, to trade, to share ideas, that never went away. Not for a second. It just found new paths to travel.
The paths themselves, they just transformed. Those ancient trails of sand gave way to the great shipping lanes of the sea. And then, those were joined by the flight paths that now crisscross the entire sky above us. And that right there is its true legacy. Every single fiber optic cable zipping our data around the planet, every cargo ship moving goods across the ocean, every international flight, every single piece of our modern connected world stands on a foundation that was first carved out by footsteps in the sand.
This was the Silk Road,